freaking 97 degrees again with 70% humidity. Feels a little bit like being in the Panamanian jungle in 1989. Only not, because I wouldn't have any idea, because I was 5 in 1989. But the book today that I read is called Doomsday Recon by Jason Onspach and Ryan Williamson. As you can see, it's got a beautiful cover with a very evocative and mood-setting eclipse, as well as some diverse side boob on the front there. The premise is that a team of military operators who are down in Panama fighting Noriega, they suddenly find themselves teleported to a different world. And they have to quickly adapt and learn what the locals are like, and who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, who they team up with, and go from there. This is the kind of book that I feel like I've read a lot of them, and they all kind of hit the same beats. Peter Nealon's Ice and Monsters was one. There was what were they? Were they Navy SEALs or were they Marine Force Recon? Some kind of special forces that found themselves going on a boat through a fog bank and coming out the other side in like a Norse alternate world, and there's trolls and stuff, and they got to figure out what to do. Taylor Anderson wrote the Destroyerman series, where a destroyer in World War II sails through a fog bank in the Pacific and comes out on the other side in some weird alternate world where there's like good guy cat people fighting bad guy lizard people, and they've got to take a side, and it's all about what you would do with an old analog destroyer in a setting like that. And this genre, it concerns itself a lot with the mechanical details and minutia of how such a thing would actually work, or what military operators would do in a setting like this. And if you're not a veteran or something, like it can be not an insurmountable obstacle, but it can be a bit dry to work your way through all that unless you just got a real big interest in it. And for me, sometimes it's presented well, other times it's like, okay, I'd like to get back to the story. There were some moments like that in Doomsday Recon, but for the most part, I found myself entertained by wherever I was in the story. Our main character is a guy named Nephi Bennett. He's a bit unique amongst the cadre of characters in this genre, because while he is a military specialist, I think he's an E4, he's a Mormon, and I was like, oh, okay, I wonder if the details are going to be right on this. It's significant because he's a returned missionary. He served a mission in Veracruz, Mexico, and he spent a lot of time in the rural and remote areas where there's still a very strong presence of Aztec culture. And he even learned a little bit of the Nahuatl language. That's significant because when he and his unit get sent back, and he's not in charge, he's just a guy in the unit, they get sent over to this mirror world where they find like Aztec culture is alive and thriving, and the Aztec gods even have a bit of a presence there, and there are people that still worship and live by the old ways. His familiarity with it becomes an intelligence asset to the unit. He's even able to speak some Nahuatl, but he finds out that he's not necessarily reliant on it because there are other things going on here. This place is constantly under the influence of the aura of a black sun. Like it's constantly in a state of partial eclipse, and the aesthetic that you get on the cover really paints a picture of what the in-world appearance is like. And as they're figuring out like who are the bad guys, who are the good guys, and who do we team up with, the story plays out as one of this genre typically does. However, there's a development in the third act that I don't want to give away. Suffice it to say that it goes in a different direction than others of its kind do. And Nephi is tried in ways other than just in testing his military combat. Like his faith is tried based on something that happens in world. There's also a romance element, as is sometimes the case in this genre. There's like a local princess that he's got to team up with. Her name is Soshi, and there was also another local girl like Ila Sodal or something. I listened to this book on Speechify, and so like I could hear the names and they would stick in my head, but I couldn't tell you how to spell them. They were Aztec names. They come across, this is the really cool thing about the world building, they come across other units that have been pulled from other points in time and that have been there for different amounts of time. So the rules are really like, this place is definitely existing outside of regular linear time. Like they run into troops from 2008 and they're like, yeah, we're about to have another election and George Bush was president, but not the one that you're familiar with from '89. This is actually his son. And there are other times like they run into kind of a burial ground of old Buffalo soldiers from the late 1800s, or they meet some guys that only got transferred over from Vietnam, and they got to figure out why they're all there. It reminded me a little bit of the movie, I think Predators. That's the one where it was kind of like people would just randomly teleport into this planet where there were predators and they'd get hunted and they would find relics of people from other time periods that also got teleported there. There was a little bit of that, but this one had more plot to it, more characterization, and I found myself a little bit more invested in it, not just because I could find myself relating to Nephi Bennett on a spiritual level. Yeah, he was a Mormon and a returned missionary and everything, but it wasn't one of those books where like they emphasized that at every single turn and it became preachy or anything. It was just an aspect of his character that did have relevance to the story, and his arc was connected to that. Content-wise, I appreciated that this was also a clean book for it being a military one. It was written under the auspices of Nephi keeping a record of what he was doing. Imagine a Nephi keeping records of things for other people to read in the Americas. Hum, hum, hum. But he even said, he's like, I'm writing this down as to what happened, under the belief that someday my mom might read it, so I'm going to censor out the F-bombs. I was like, cool, good. So there wasn't any of that so much. And while he did take up a relationship with one of the local girls, they didn't get down diggity down until they got married by a local friar, a guy who got pulled in from a different time period, and a religious leader. And he's like, all right, well, this is the local law in this area. And I believe in being legally and lawfully wedded. And, they come to an understanding, the troops there, that people come into this world, but nobody ever leaves and goes back home. So he comes to kind of accept that he's going to be stuck there, and he might as well make a life there and get married and have kids and stuff. So it's hard for me to describe what the main thrust of the plot is without giving it away. Just they discover other factions. Some are good, some are bad, and there are some very unique and potent resources to fight over, and Nephi's team has to decide what to do with these resources and which sides to take in this conflict. I'm vaguely describing what are basically staples of this subgenre of, we'll say, military isekai sci-fi fantasy. But out of all of the ones that I've read, and I've been bored with plenty of them, this one, like I kept wanting to go back, and I didn't want to skip ahead or anything. It's like, let me get the whole story here. Start to finish, I was satisfied. I think, for my money, it's probably the best example of this genre. Although the other two that I've really enjoyed were also by Jason Onspach. Warlord, which was a very heavily John Carter flavored military isekai, and also Tier 1000, which wasn't necessarily isekai. It was more about like really special elite soldiers that died, got to go to like a spirit world where they were then trained by other legendary veterans, and they got to fight for war gods of different mythologies. So like Ares is there, I think a death god from the Aztecs was there, etc., etc. You get the idea. So all in all, I give Doomsday Recon 4 stars, and I believe there are 3 books in this series out now, and I'm looking forward to read the other ones. I'm going to take a break and read something a little bit different, but there are other series of this type that, like, I've read the first one and I was like, yeah, I'm not really all that interested in reading the second one. This one, I want to see where the arc goes from here, especially after that epilogue. So a hearty recommendation for Doomsday Recon by Onspach and Williamson. That's all for now. Drive safe. See you out there.